Discover the incredible journey of a male concubine in ancient Greece. A hidden life revealed. Lucas stepped into the rain-soaked world of Maplewood, each droplet seeming to highlight the mundanity of his life. As a librarian, he lived among tales of courage and treachery that overshadowed his own neglected dreams. With every deliberate step toward the library, he braced himself against the weight of his quiet existence. Reliable, dependable, these were the words the townsfolk used to describe him, but they felt more like chains than accolades. Behind his neat appearance and the careful manner in which he arranged books lay a desperate yearning for adventure, for recognition that never seemed to come. It was on one of those gray afternoons, after another lonely day of cataloging dusty volumes, that he stumbled upon something unimaginable. A weathered envelope lay on his doorstep, its corners battered and edges torn. Inside, letters revealed a lineage that shocked him. His ancestors, celebrated male courtesans in ancient Greece, renowned for intellect and charm. The words danced before him, igniting a fire smothered under layers of humility and routine. Who was he really? The librarian, or an answer to a legacy he never knew existed? His hands trembled as he read on, excitement mixing with a familiar dread. What if he embraced this? Would it mean severing ties with the life he had known? The secrets of his lineage stirred something deep within him. The stories of these courtesans were no mere tales. They symbolized a life of freedom, artistry, and expression. Yet, lurking at the back of his mind were the values his family instilled in him: hard work, humility, propriety. Could he betray them in pursuit of something more? The thought caused his chest to tighten. Each ambition carried the risk of alienation from Maplewood, a small town where tradition reigned. Before he could wrestle further with these feelings, an unexpected visit from his old mentor, Professor Mitchell, swept into his life, a gust of wind shattering his carefully maintained facade. The professor believed in Lucas' potential, igniting the creative spark long dormant within him. But with that encouragement came an unsettling realization. Was he truly talented, or merely a product of praise? Lucas felt waves of vulnerability crash over him. Art, he discovered, was a double-edged sword. It could elevate him or alienate him, could bring acclaim or condemnation. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Determined, Lucas began to channel his conflicting emotions into art, inviting townspeople to view exhibitions that celebrated Greek culture, the very essence of his newfound identity. As the events unfolded, curious faces filled the library, yet tension simmered beneath the surface. Old beliefs clashed with fresh ideas. The whispers became louder. The fear of losing community approval gnawed at him, yet the thrill of stepping into the unknown exhilarated him. Would he dare challenge the norms that had shaped him? Now, standing before a blank wall, a canvas of sorts, Lucas faced his ultimate decision. His heart raced. How could creating this mural in homage to his ancestors bring honor to his bloodline without isolating him from those he loved? The crowd behind him was alive with expectation, their gazes filled with a mixture of hope and suspicion. In that moment, he felt utterly exposed. Would he take the plunge into the uncharted waters of his family's legacy, or retreat into the safety of his predictable world? The weight of the moment bore down on him, leaving him motionless, paintbrush hovering. A soft murmur arose from the crowd, slicing through Lucas's hesitation. Each voice was a reminder of both support and skepticism, a duality that tightened around his throat. He could taste the acridity of fear tinged with exhilaration. What felt like a simple act of painting had morphed into a torrential storm of doubt and aspiration. His senses heightened as he looked out at familiar faces, all anticipating his next move. He inhaled deeply, grounding himself. The smell of linseed oil and fresh acrylics mingled with the damp air of Maplewood, each brushstroke a potential reconciliation of who he was and what he could become. Lucas reached for the brush, his fingers trembling as he dipped it into vibrant blue, the color of the Aegean Sea, a spectrum of depth and brilliance. It symbolized freedom, adventure, the grandeur of the very lineage he sought to honor. The first stroke was tentative, yet it unleashed something primal and raw within him. With each movement, he channeled not just the stories of his ancestors, but his own unarticulated fears and desires. As he painted, a sense of release swept over him. He was not just Lucas, the librarian. He was an embodiment of his roots, of artistry blooming in the ashes of expectation. Yet still, the nagging thought remained. What if this act of bravery led to rejection? There was a fine line between admiration and scorn, especially in a community as close-knit as Maplewood. Would the townspeople celebrate his tribute, or would they deem it frivolous, a betrayal of their values? The remnants of his upbringing resisted the notion that artistry sanctioned such risks. Behind every flourish of pigment was a reminder of the librarian who had walked the straight path, a path that felt increasingly foreign. With the mural's dynamic forms coming to life, Lucas's hands began to liberate the very essence of storytelling he had cherished in the books lining the library's shelves. It was narrative made vivid, a visual dialogue reflecting both the heritage of his forebears and the conflict boiling within him. He was a tether between past and present, grappling with each brushstroke underscored by an exhilarating fear of discovery. The colors pulsated, a chorus of passion that enveloped him. The awe of creative expression began to drown out the dogged whisper of tradition. But moments later, a stark voice rang out from the back of the crowd, slicing through his burgeoning confidence. "Lucas, is this really who you are? Or are you just imitating ghosts?" A chill cascaded down his spine, cool as the rain. The inquiry sparked immediate tension, a jolt that shook Lucas to the core. Was he only rehashing a past he barely understood, or was this mural a genuine testament to self-actualization? The layers of his life, the burdens of perception and reality, twisted and tangled within him, demanding an answer. His brush slowed as the room's atmosphere shifted, eyes shifting in anticipation. As he turned to face the crowd, they awaited a response, a clue to his inner landscape. In that expectant silence, the question echoed louder than ever. Who was he meant to be? Lucas's heart thundered in his chest. This was no longer merely about a mural. It had evolved into the confrontation of his identity. Would he find the courage to embrace his ancestral legacy, risking the comfort of familiarity? The moment had come, and as the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating his canvas, he felt a heat rising from within, a resolution igniting. The question of who he was tormented him, but now, it intertwined with determination. Stepping back, he brushed paint from his hands and breathed, the weight shifting. It was time to confront the legacy head-on. But what awaited him beyond this first act of defiance? The rumors he may have to face, and the allies he might lose. The journey was only beginning, and he knew the tides of change were rising. The murmur of the crowd faded into a low hum as Lucas focused on the vibrant blue swirls he was creating, grounding himself in the rhythm of the brush against the canvas. Yet, the voice of doubt lingered, a specter that danced just out of reach. Who was he really, stripped of the layers of familial expectation and community traditions? With each stroke, Lucas felt a sense of urgency building within him. This painting was beyond mere color. It was a mural of his identity, a mosaic assembled from fragmented pieces of heritage and individual desire, a tapestry woven of histories, fears, and ambitions. The vivid blue transformed into waves crashing against a rocky shore, the sun setting on an horizon of possibilities, illuminating both the joy and tension coexisting within him. He tried to channel the voice of certainty he had hidden away. His mother had often said that art demanded authenticity, not mere repetition of what had come before. He sought to embody that lesson, battling the remnants of doubt that threatened to bind him. As he transitioned from deep blues to bright yellows, the flames of potential ignited in his mind. This mural could shine light onto the uncharted landscapes of his psyche. "Maybe I am a ghost," he whispered to himself, allowing the words to hang in the air between paint strokes. "But I can be a ghost with purpose." Striding forward, he mixed bold strokes of yellow, capturing the sun's radiant glare, a beacon of hope contrasting the shadows of his insecurities. The crowd remained captivated, their intensity punctuated when Lucas unleashed his fervor onto the canvas. Each movement was an expression of defiance, of authenticity, an act of reclaiming the narrative that governed both his life and the lives of countless ancestors. This mural was a conversation not only with the audience, but a spirited dialogue with himself. Can I really do this? The tremble returned to his fingers, uncertainty creeping back. The probing voice resounded in his mind, amplifying the tension with every passing moment. What if the community rejected him not just as an artist, but as Lucas, the librarian in whom they had placed their trust? He closed his eyes, and for a heartbeat, the outside world faded. Behind his eyelids, a flicker of clarity emerged. He wasn't merely creating a mural for the townsfolk. He was crafting a bridge to his own inner self. It had taken years of artificial suppression, layers of self-doubt built thick around his ego like the dust collecting on forgotten books in the library. As shadows danced across the mural, they began to take different forms, images of mentors, of beloved characters in cherished novels, each whispering encouragement. The tension began to shift. Empowerment seeped into every pigment he placed, infusing his strokes with audacity. He was more than the sum of his past failures. He was a reservoir of potential. With a decisive flourish, he added elements that were distinctly his own, swirls of unexpected colors and patterns that broke through the constraints of tradition. His heart raced, not from fear, but from exhilaration. He had begun to excavate parts of himself that had remained dormant for so long. Yet, amidst the burgeoning excitement, shadows of doubt continued to loom. What would the audience say if he stepped too far outside their expectations? The weight of that fear pressed down, countering the euphoric momentum he had gained. What if they see me as a fool? The thought slashed through his resolve, making him falter momentarily. Was he straying from the expectations that had shaped him? Or was it merely the catalyst he needed for genuine growth? In that moment, he realized the mural held not only his history, but also the power to redefine his future. The ghosts of the past don't define me, he declared under his breath, feeling a resilience rise within him as he immersed himself deeper in the creation process. The sky outside began to darken, clouds gathering ominously overhead. The air thickened. A storm brewed not just within the heavens, but also within Lucas's heart. Would this act of creative bravery yield an answer to the question of who he was meant to become, or would it unleash a tempest he couldn't contain? The brush paused mid-stroke. Outside influences threatened to snuff out the flicker of determination he had ignited. Lucas took a deep breath, his resolve both invigorated and fraught with peril. It was a storm, and he was standing on the precipice. Would he dare to ride the waves, or retreat to calmer shores? The answer was hidden in the upcoming faces that surrounded him. He knew one thing for sure: the journey of self-discovery was far from over, and as the winds began to howl, Lucas felt the crescendo of change rising within him. What revelation awaited him on the other side of this tempest? With each pass of the brush, Lucas felt the storm within him intensify, mirroring the chaos gathering outside. The once calm resolve had morphed into a tempest of emotions, a battle between the desire for acceptance and the yearning for authenticity. The fresh, bold strokes were not simply colors on canvas. They encapsulated his struggle against the weight of societal norms that had long restrained him. He stepped back, squinting at the mural. Vibrant yellows clashed beautifully with deep blues, yet the unyielding question gripped him. What if vibrant wasn't enough? What if, despite the colors, he was still just a flicker in a community that valued tradition over innovation, form over function? He hesitated, feeling the eyes around him weighing heavy with expectation. What if they think I'm not enough? The dread crawled into his mind, planting seeds of doubt. Shaking his head, Lucas opted to confront that very fear head-on. There was power in his painting a narrative that transcended the boundaries of his past. He was more than just Lucas the librarian. He was also an artist. Could he let the past dictate whom he could become, or could he redefine that narrative through the very act of creation? Each brush stroke was a statement, each color a declaration of freedom. Emboldened, he returned to the canvas. With deliberate movements, he began to layer textures he had always avoided, thick impastos of paint that reflected the tumult of his emotions. He felt raw, exposed. People often spoke of art as an easy escape, but for Lucas, This mural was becoming his battlefield, a site for wrestling with his own identity, confronting insecurities that had long been buried beneath years of compliance. The storm clouds outside darkened, casting eerie shadows across the mural, amplifying the urgency of his work. The winds howled, and Lucas could feel their energy pulsating through him, mirroring the conflict within. "I will not be a ghost," he murmured, suddenly fierce. He began adding shapes that suggested movement, creating a crescendo that echoed the tempest brewing both internally and externally. The colors transformed, not just an explosion of hues, but a language where each stroke told a story, one of aspiration, of dreams deferred, of a journey taken. A light seemed to flicker within him, illuminating his path forward. Each stroke now came with purpose, imbued with an intensity that demanded to be seen, to be felt. Then, a flash of lightning lit up the sky outside, illuminating the mural momentarily. It was as if the universe was acknowledging his struggle. If he stepped into the light, could he finally be seen? Nonconformity had its risks, yet the potential for personal truth shimmered tantalizingly on the horizon. The fear began to morph, shifting from paralyzing doubt to a flicker of exhilaration. "What if I do this?" he thought, letting the rush of possibility flood his senses. As he added more intricate details, the faces he painted weren't just reflections of his own, each depicted strength, defiance, and the beauty of vulnerability. Yet, lurking beneath the excitement was that same haunting fear. Would they understand his message? If he stood fully revealed, would the warmth return, or would he be the pariah he feared, an outsider in his own town? With the final strokes of the mural glowing under the flickering overhead light, he paused. The storm outside reached its zenith, and the thundering chaos sparked one last question. What awaited him after the tempest? What new version of himself would emerge when the winds calmed? He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, and with it, the growing conviction that he was ready to unearth more of himself than he had thought possible. As he prepared for the unveiling, Lucas realized he was standing at the juncture of transformation. The artwork shimmered with potential, and with it, the promise of a new identity. The winds howled louder, beckoning him toward the unknown. The time had come to claim his narrative, to not just ride the waves, but to become a force of nature. Lucas turned, to face the audience once more, breath hitching, heart pounding. Would he stand firm as the storm surged, or would he allow uncertainty to dictate his fate? The reckoning awaited just ahead, with the canvas as his battleground. Lucas's breath caught in his throat as he faced the assembled crowd, a sea of expressions reflecting curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation. The storm outside seemed to echo the tumult within him. Each person was a potential judge of his worth as an artist and as an individual. Doubt flickered, a ghost trying to reconnect with him against the whirlwind of emotion surging through his veins. Could he truly reveal himself, unclothed by fear and cloaked solely in authenticity? He took a step forward, heart racing, his trembling hands still stained with paint from his earlier fervor. "This mural," he began, voice wavering yet resolute, "is more than just color on canvas. It's who I've become, who I'm striving to be. It's layered with my fears, my dreams, the very essence of my struggle against a world that often feels suffocating." A murmuring rippled through the audience, raising the hair on the back of his neck. Angels and demons danced in the air, acceptance versus rejection, transformation versus complacency. Despite the absence of overwhelming support, a flicker of strength ignited in Lucas's core. He forced himself to meet the eyes filling the room, daring to connect with each one. He wondered, did they see the message, or were they still tethered to their expectations? He needed to break the silence weighing heavy like a shroud. "I've lived for too long in the shadows of others' approval," he asserted, the conviction in his voice growing bolder with each word. "This mural is my declaration that I will no longer suffocate beneath the weight of others' limitations." As he gestured to the sweeping curves and sharp edges of his painting, he felt a shift in the atmosphere. The bright yellows now seemed to pulse with energy, while dark blues and greens swirled into a dynamic landscape of conflict and triumph. It dawned on him that, like his mural, he was not an isolated color. He was part of a larger tapestry. Fear melted away into determination. But just as the tide of confidence rose, a shadow loomed larger, embodied by Richard, the head of the local cultural committee, whose disapproving gaze pierced through the vibrant colors of Lucas's creation. "You've painted quite the picture, Lucas," he called, his tone dripping with skepticism. "But art holds a responsibility. You risk alienating those who cherish tradition." A ripple of tension spread through the crowd at Richard's words, emboldening Lucas to step deeper into conflict. "I believe art's true power lies in its ability to challenge, not conform," he countered, suddenly more aware of the truth of his own words. "My journey is human, multifaceted, just like this mural." The conviction solidified. This was his moment of reckoning. And yet, the gravity of the situation settled like stone in his stomach. Would he alienate those who had shaped his life if he embraced this new truth? Or would he be stripped of himself and forced to yield yet again to outside influences? Each breath grown heavier. He felt the electric pulse of possibility battling against the weight of obligation. Just then, the walls that contained him felt more like armor than confinement. He realized that it was not just about whether others accepted him, but whether he accepted himself. Was he ready to embrace vulnerability, an artist laying bare his identity for all to see? Lucas stepped back, the thunder rolling outside meeting his resolve. With the mural as his shield and messenger, he sensed a newfound power surging through him. The winds outside became less an obstacle and more a catalyst for transformation. As he faced Richard, he understood he needed to confront this conflict head-on. "What if," he began, "the path to acceptance lies not in compromises, but in courage to express one's true self, despite the storm." The silence was punctuated by a crack of thunder, and in that charged moment, Lucas felt the tumult settle within him. The reckoning lingered, and he stood poised, ready to embrace whatever challenge followed. As the audience processed what he had revealed, Lucas wondered, would he find allies in his quest for authenticity, or be left to battle the tempest alone? The winds howled, resting on his decision, and the next beat of his heart sparked the anticipation of what awaited him in this uncharted territory. The tension in the air thickened as Richard's words hung like a storm cloud above Lucas. A few whispers emerged from the crowd, but he tuned them out, focusing instead on the turmoil within him. This was no longer merely about a mural or the approval of others. It was about awakening the artist he had stifled for too long. Each heartbeat felt like an echo of his newfound resolution. He would not retreat into the shadows. Richard's face remained a mask of skepticism, but behind the facade, Lucas sensed a glimmer of uncertainty. The man represented tradition, layers of crusty expectations baked into the fabric of the community. But Lucas was a wave crashing against those familiar shores, and that energy pushed him further into his conviction. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment, and as he did, a realization swept over him. What if vulnerability was not a weakness, but a gateway to profound connection? With newfound clarity, he shifted his stance, embracing the space and the audience, gathering the courage to engage them further. Art isn't just there to please. It's a reflection of our lives, our struggles, our truths. Each word shot from him like a clarion call. To ignore that is to silence the raw beauty of our experiences. He scanned the crowd, searching for recognition, seeking allies who understood the weight of masked authenticity. In that instant, Lucas noticed a young woman in the front row, her eyes brimming with tears. Was she moved or offended? He had already unveiled parts of himself she could resonate with. Perhaps they could dare to share their truths together. That flicker of humanity catalyzed a shift. It anchored him as an artist. Fear bubbled up, a familiar specter, this time sparked by the very notion of connecting with someone who shared his struggle. What if he let her down? What if his journey was too hard for her to follow? Yet a greater realization jolted through him. It wasn't about perfection, but about authenticity in the midst of chaos. With a sudden jolt, Lucas pointed toward the mural behind him, the bright yellows contrasting against the dark blues. Where do you see yourselves in this chaos? In the starkness or the brilliance? I painted these colors not to risk alienation, but to invite our truths into the light. Richard's expression hardened, his brow furrowing deeper. He stepped forward, attempting to reassert control. You may interpret your journey as you will, but your role is to elevate, not divide. The challenge ignited the last remnants of doubt lingering in Lucas's chest. No longer could he yield ground that belonged to his voice. I refuse to let anyone dictate the parameters of my expression or the aspirations of my art. The atmosphere crackled with the energy of rising stakes, each word sharpening his focus on the path ahead, a confrontation with tradition anchored in his newfound sense of self. Then, a thought invaded his mind, a whisper of a question that strained against the surface of his burgeoning self-acceptance. What if this very moment became a catalyst for transformation, not just for himself, but for those in attendance? What if a shift began here, in this charged atmosphere? I can't promise I'll please everyone, Lucas asserted, his voice steady, but I can promise you that I'll be honest. Maybe if we all strive to be authentic, we can build a new understanding. Who else with me? As he finished speaking, Lucas felt a palpable shift. The crowd, at first hesitant, shifted, their murmurs rising into a hum. They were contemplating, engaging. What had begun as a showdown was now a call to introspection. But before he could hold hope too close, he caught sight of Richard tightening his lips, a storm of rejection brewing in his eyes. Lucas could sense the stakes heightening, and he knew this battle was far from over. He stood, unyielding, amidst the flickering candles of doubt and flickers of recognition. Would his call for authenticity lead to acceptance or further alienation? The winds howled, not just outside but within, shaping the trajectory of his newfound resolve. As Lucas scanned the room, he felt the weight of the moment pressing upon him. Would he have the strength to challenge Richard again, to push further into vulnerability? Would his artistic spirit stand strong in the face of the tempest ahead? The air thickened with uncertainty as his mind raced toward the lessons the storm was about to reveal. The flickering tension in the room intensified, and Lucas felt gravity pulling him deeper into the maelstrom of his own resolve. He had opened a door, but now he stood on the precipice of what lay beyond. The weight of his own honesty posed a terrifying question: was he truly prepared for the consequences of this revelation? Richard's voice cut through the stifling air, each word a lash. What you're proposing isn't art, it's chaos. A flimsy excuse to parade your personal grievances. His eyes bore into Lucas, challenging him to retreat, to recoil into safer narratives. Lucas clenched his fists, the heat of indignation rising in him. He had spent far too long staying quiet under the imposing shadow of expectation. But now the very air thrummed with the pulse of creative possibility. Was it not chaos that birthed new realms of expression? He took a step forward, the urge to confront bolstering him. And what is art if not an expression of the chaotic beauty we try to understand? Think about it. Do our lives not swirl in chaos, yearning for clarity? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some heads nodded in slow agreement. Lucas seized the moment. I spent years believing that my art had to fit a mold. I silenced the voice that screamed inside me, told me to paint my truth. In this moment, the young woman he noticed earlier met his gaze, a spark of understanding igniting in her eyes. She was with him, as were others slowly awakening to the weight of his words. He felt the momentum shift, felt hands beginning to lift in tentative solidarity. Look around you, Lucas urged, gesturing to the mural, to the swirling colors that captured both agony and joy. This isn't just my story, it's ours. It's a tapestry of our shared experiences. By revealing our truths, we build bridges instead of walls. Richard stepped back, visibly rattled. The armor that had protected him for so long began to crack as doubt seeped through. Lucas could almost hear the gears turning in Richard's mind, questioning the very foundation he had set for artistic value. But Lucas knew this interaction was only part of the journey. The irony that his confrontation with tradition would occur in public view exhilarated him. He wondered how many others were held captive by the same fears he had faced. What if the act of resisting conformity could empower more than just himself? Art flourishes in authenticity, he continued, his voice unwavering. We're not here to sanitize our lives, but to express them. The gathering crowd grew restless, but the faint hum of agreement amplified, like insects buzzing under the night sky. Yet a gnawing doubt clung to him. Was he simply stirring a pot too volatile? Would the crowd's awakening dissolve as quickly as it had ignited? The heaviness of Richard's gaze remained a constant weight, like a predator waiting for the right opportunity to pounce. Lucas realized that this was not just a battle for acceptance. It was a power struggle for the future of his art. He steadied himself, taking a moment to breathe, grounding himself in the knowledge of his truth and the fervor it sparked in others. But just then, a sly grin spread over Richard's face, a serpent-esque smile cloaked in deception. "All right, Lucas," he said, his tone laced with condescension. "You've stirred things up here. But are you ready for what happens next? When the tables turn, and this community demands more than just your fleeting moment of authenticity." Nathan's heart raced as he processed the challenge drifting towards him, a potential tipping point that could either seal his fate as a true artist or suffocate him in the shadows once again. Would he stand tall against the storm Richard threatened, or would he slip back into retreat? And with that thought echoing in his mind, Lucas braced for the next wave, knowing that the lesson of vulnerability was only just beginning to unfold. Would he find the strength to engage, to rise to the challenge Richard had thrown down? What awaited him in the fallout of his choices? Adrenaline surged through Lucas as he squared his shoulders, the air around him thick with expectancy. The challenge Richard had laid at his feet felt like both a gauntlet and a lifeline, a chance for him to prove that this moment could bleed into the next phase of his artistic evolution. But the flicker in Richard's eyes told him that tests would come. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the shared pulse of the gathered crowd. Their energy was infectious, pushing him beyond the bounds of his fears. They were not merely an audience. They were witnesses to his metamorphosis. "Are you ready?" Richard's challenged tone echoed again. It wasn't an invitation, but a warning, a carefully crafted provocation that sought to unmask Lucas's vulnerability. The dance of fear and determination swirled within him, and he recognized the gnawing sense of imposter syndrome that had plagued him for years. He could either collapse, retreating back into the safety of conformity, or step fully into the unknown. "Tell me, Richard," Lucas retorted, his voice steadier than he felt. "What do you fear more, my chaos, or the possibility that your control might slip away?" The crowd's murmurs rose. This was no longer a solitary struggle. In a flash, Lucas's mind swung open to the myriad artists who had walked this path before him. He thought of the painters, the musicians, the writers who had shattered ceilings, unearthing the raw humanity in their work. He felt them standing alongside him in this conflict, lending wings to his conviction. He was not just Lucas. He was a vessel, a conduit for their stories, too. His thoughts swirled as he faced Richard. Each second bore the weight of unspoken history, personal battles fought in the silence of stifling rooms just like this one. "Your discomfort speaks volumes." Lucas pressed on, finding his footing. "It's not the chaos of my art that troubles you. You fear that if authenticity rises, your reign over how art is valued will falter. You cling to respectability like a lifeboat, but this?" He gestured to the vibrant chaos behind him. "This is where we find authenticity. It's where creativity is born." Richard's features hardened, but the shift in the audience was palpable. Tension rippled among them like a tidal wave ready to crash. Amidst his boldness, a familiar seed of doubt sprouted. Had he gone too far? What if Richard's retaliation pushed him back into a silent corner? Anxiety clawed at him, but he steadied his breath, recalling each brushstroke he had painted, every message he had longed to convey through art. "No more excuses," he urged the audience. "This isn't about acceptance from a few powerful voices. It's about embracing every voice, every shade of experience. What if we don't just document the struggle? What if we celebrate it?" In this instant, clarity illuminated Lucas's path forward. The world outside had long been conditioned to dismiss discomfort, to gloss over messy realities. He understood now that each brush of his paint could rip open the facade of artistic perfection, allowing vulnerability to bleed through. As the hum of agreement solidified into something more, a tangible shift in energy, Lucas felt a warmth unfurl within him, part inspiration, part fear. What would it mean to embrace this fervor fully? To lay bare not only his triumphs, but his failures? "Will you stand with me?" He called into the sea of faces, his voice unwavering yet laced with urgency. The moment stretched, anticipation weaving through the crowd. What came next was uncertain, but Lucas realized he was ready to confront whatever storm Richard had unleashed. Digging deep, his spirit ignited by the potential around him, Lucas found that this was not just a moment of validation. It was a reckoning. And as Richard's serpentine grin twisted into a scowl, Lucas braced himself for the imminent clash, his heart racing toward the confrontation that would define him, a challenge thicker than colors strewn across canvas, more true than any lie he had ever told himself. The moment for decision had come, and with it, the undeniable question: how far was he willing to go to claim his narrative as his own? Each heartbeat drummed the tempo of impending change, marking an inflection point in his journey. What awaited him on the other side of this challenge? The tension in the room tightened like a drawn bowstring, the collective breath of the audience suspended in disbelief. Lucas's heart thudded at an irregular tempo, matching the frenetic energy coursing through him. He had stepped into the light, a dancer ready to tread a stage both foreign and familiar. Richard's glare felt like a collision of two forces, one seeking dominance and the other yearning for liberation. Your words divide rather than unite, Richard shot back, his voice dripping with condescension. Art is about restriction, precision. Without it, we drown in chaos. Lucas swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the challenge bolster his resolve. Was he truly ready to face this antagonism head-on? He could sense the duality within himself, the artist longing for expression clashing with a part that feared the repercussions of failure. Do you know how many great works were born from chaos? Lucas countered, channeling all the muscle memory of his artistic journey. What you're calling chaos is merely the first step towards something extraordinary. Who are we to restrict the leaps of those who dare to soar? Richard scoffed, his arrogance mounting. You will learn the hard way that art needs boundaries. The crowd's divided reactions rippled across their expressions. Some eyes glimmered with the intoxication of revelation, while others reflected skepticism. Lucas took a deep breath, noticing each face as an individual narrative of potential shared understanding. In that instant, a revelation sharpened in his mind. He was no longer simply defending an abstract idea of art. He was articulating his own convictions born from years of struggle against self-doubt. His canvas was not just paint, but everything he had endured: the failures, the fears, the long nights wrestling with inadequacies. He could transform this moment from confrontation to an awakening. Boundaries are what keep us in prison, he declared, his voice gaining momentum. When we hold on too tightly to them, we risk losing the very essence of creativity. And in that loss, we become empty. The crowd seemed to shift, their energy morphing into a collective warmth that embraced the rawness of his words. He caught their glances, allowing their silent support to embolden him. Stepping closer to Richard, Lucas leaned into the challenge, the difference in their worlds crystallizing. What scares us most lies in the depths we avoid, he said softly, but firmly. Are you prepared to face that? Richard's demeanor faltered, the smooth surface of his control cracking under the pressure of Lucas's sentiment. For a fleeting moment, Lucas glimpsed uncertainty flicker in his opponent's eyes, a chink in the armor he thought impregnable. Driven by newfound clarity, Lucas continued, maybe we all need to dive into those depths, to confront the uncomfortable truths lurking beneath the surface. Art isn't merely an aesthetic, it's a reflection of our shared humanity. As he spoke, a wave of confidence surged through him, swelling against the tide of doubt that had once threatened to drown him. He understood now, with visceral clarity, that personal growth meant embracing the uncomfortable aspects of oneself. The struggles, the missteps, all of it contributed to a richer narrative. The silence enveloping the room thickened, and in it lay an invitation, one that challenged him to execute his vision without limitation. The metaphorical shackles of convention rattled against his newfound conviction, each sound echoing the sentiment of millions of artists who had come before him. Will you join me? He implored once more, sensing the fragile tremor of possibility within the crowd. Will you dare to challenge the status quo and redefine what art means to us all? As the murmurs began to resonate, Lucas felt a shift, a synergistic pulse enveloping him as he connected deeper with his audience. Just as he illuminated his path, the question loomed: would Richard entrench further into his fortress, or would he risk breaking the walls and uncovering the truth behind their artistic disparity? The promise of release was tantalizingly near. Yet amongst the growing tremors of hope, Lucas sensed the looming shadows of Richard's retaliation stirring, aggression brewing. It felt as if the confrontation had only just begun, and he braced himself for the unpredictable nature of what could emerge next. Would he finally claim the narrative that had been clawing to break free? In that moment, the stakes heightened, wrapping him within a cocoon of both fear and exhilaration. The greatest challenge awaited, and Lucas stood poised on the precipice, realizing that true evolution lay just beyond the edge of this confrontation. What would he discover about himself in the process? Stepping into the vibrant space of his newly completed mural, Lucas took a long, deep breath, the blend of colors swirling around him a reflection of the tumultuous journey that had led him here. His heart was a cacophony of drumming beats, but within that chaos emerged a profound sense of accomplishment. This was not merely a mural. It was a declaration of his identity, a testament to the man he had become after accepting his past, while dynamically carving his future. The last vestiges of doubt were swept away with each brushstroke. He could envision the faces of his ancestors looking down upon him with pride. He thought about all those years spent buried behind the shelves of the library, silently yearned for something greater, something that truly resonated with who he was. In this vivid display of artistry, Lucas had indeed achieved that connection both with his roots and with himself. With the audience gathered around him, their eyes flared with a mixture of admiration and uncertainty. He felt their weight, both as a community and individuals. He remembered Richard's challenge and the fragmented pieces of self-worth that had once held him captive. Each syllable had felt like a tether, but here, as he faced the spectators before him, he realized those chains had shattered. The power was now in his hands, and he was ready to prove it. "I invite you all," he said, his voice firm yet inviting, "to look beyond what you see and embrace the chaos that inspires creation." The crowd rippled with curiosity. He was no longer merely a librarian or an heir to a distinguished lineage. He was the embodiment of transformation, grounded in authenticity. The mural glistened under the gallery lights, showcasing intricate details that revealed stories of struggle intertwined with triumph. The tapestry woven from every stroke of his brush reflected not just his journey, but also resonated with their shared human experience. Faces illuminated from the depths of blues and sunny yellows seemed to peer back at the audience, invoking emotions they had long buried. They began to murmur, recognition dawning as they realized his struggle mirrored theirs, a yearning to be seen, to be heard. What if we embraced our echoes? Lucas ventured further, rallying the crowd. What if we understood that our journeys are intertwined, filled with both chaos and beauty? The energy in the room shifted palpably as heads nodded, a distinct camaraderie forming among them, a connection born from shared vulnerability. He looked at Richard, whose expression had softened, betraying cracks in his resolve. During their earlier exchanges, Lucas had sensed fear manifesting in Richard's eyes, not mere disdain for chaos, but rather the dread of losing control. And here he was, reaching out not just to call into question Richard's notion of art, but to validate their collective experiences. Perhaps there was a way to reconcile the need for tradition with the inevitability of evolution. Art can challenge, Lucas proclaimed, yet it can also unite. It invites us to explore what lies beyond our comfort zones, revealing truths if we're willing to look. A ripple of applause erupted from the crowd, the sound rising in waves, washing over him with affirmation. The thunderous claps felt like validation for his efforts to navigate a formerly murky journey filled with uncertainty. He noticed the young woman from earlier, her tears now glistening with joy, not sorrow, a reminder of every person longing for recognition, for expression. Emboldened, Lucas stepped back to side with his mural. "This is us together, whole, bursting with potential." His heart swelled with pride as he demonstrated the full spectrum of emotions reflected in the colors around him. At that moment, Lucas understood something fundamental about creative expression. It was rooted in the messiness of authenticity. He had not only created a mural, he had created a movement, a summons to a new era for Maplewood. Richard took a step forward, lowering his guard, and for the first time, he spoke different words of potential invitation. Perhaps it's time to rethink our definitions, to welcome the unpredictable as part of our narratives. The audience shifted, some gasping at the unexpected shift. The sentiment of acceptance unfolded like a flower blossoming in the midst of a storm. Lucas's heart soared. He had deliberately taken the risk, and now, it appeared the seeds he had sown across the community were beginning to take root. He had proven himself not just as the librarian, but as a creator, an authentic artist capable of sparking change that he welcomed the murmurs, laughter, and cheers as an affirmation of this new chapter unfolding in his life, a life now characterized by confidence instead of reticence, by creativity instead of conformity. And he knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he had finally stepped into his own power. As the clapping subsided and the murmurings of hope filled the space, Lucas turned to face his mural one last time. The vibrant waves of color sang of adversity transformed into artistry, of fears confronted, and the courage to begin anew. Lucas had conquered doubt and emerged into fulfillment, not just for himself, but for everyone willing to embrace the complexity of their own stories. And with that realization, the sun began to pierce the clouds outside, casting a warm glow on the town he had once felt so disconnected from. In that moment, Lucas knew he had not only captured his roots, but had also created a bridge toward a brighter, more inclusive future. This was his metamorphosis, and the exhilarating journey had only just begun. You need to subscribe now to witness more transformative stories that touch the soul. Leave a like now to show your appreciation for this journey of self-discovery. Comment below with your thoughts on Lucas's evolution and any theories you may have. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who can find inspiration in Lucas's story of personal overcoming.